occurring to us, and we were getting bills that had 110 co-sponsors, but it wasn't successful at getting the votes to be enacted. So what was going on? And we started looking into other issues and other good bipartisan bills that were in the same situation. And so I moved my research almost totally into looking at the legislative dysfunction that is occurring. And I didn't know what the answers were going to be, but I was looking into the data. And I got a real surprise. So for this presentation, what I'm going to do is go through these following items. How many people here are familiar with how the bill goes through the legislature? Okay, so I'll go through that more quickly maybe, because you kind of have to understand what the steps are to know where the roadblocks and who and when they're being blocked, which will be next. Then we looked at past legislative performance in passing bills. And I have an update as to what just happened in 2025, the 12 months of this 2-year session. I give 3 examples from last session of bipartisan bills that were actually successful and became enacted, even though they had years of failure. Shouldn't take years, doesn't have to be that way. I'll give some more examples of bills that continue to fail, good bipartisan bills. And finally, to look at collaborative rules that other states have, again, to the point of it doesn't have to be this way in Pennsylvania. So here's how the bill progresses through. This is just a generic one where a bill is introduced, it goes to a committee. The committee can consider it or not. They can amend it or not. And if it comes back out, it has its first of 3 required constitutional considerations, because it's in our Constitution. It's not just in the rules. That has to be considered on 3 separate days.
By the committees?
If it comes out of the committee, if it's reported out.
Okay, so on the floor.
So on the floor, yes, yes, I'm sorry, yes, correct, yes. So it's come out to the floor, and it's given 3 considerations on 3 separate days. When it comes out of the committee, it automatically gets a first consideration. It automatically goes on the table, which is like, I'm going to put this over here, we'll come back to it. So that is done regardless. Then you need somebody to remove it from the table and put it on the calendar in order to do anything with it. And during that second consideration, it may or may not be amended. So if it is successful at getting out off the table and into the calendar and have second consideration, then it goes to the Appropriations Committee. And the Appropriations Committee is the one who develops fiscal notes for each bill. And that fiscal note talks about how much money this is going to cost the government, or how much money this is going to make for the government, or if it's financially neutral. So then it comes out and it's ready for its third consideration, but it can be tabled. And somebody has to take it off the table. As a matter of fact, in both the House and the Senate, if a bill is on the calendar without active consideration at all, I mean, discussing, bringing it up for votes, whatever, if it's like 10 days or 15 days, depending on the chamber, it will actually be tabled automatically. They don't even have to mention it during the session day. It's not even part of the legislative journals, the transcripts for those days. It just happens quietly. Right, if it's remained on the calendar, but there hasn't been any action on it, like it's they bring it up for consideration and there's amendments or no amendments and that sort of thing, then it just automatically goes away. And someone, the leader, the majority leader, has to then overtly take it off the table and put it back onto the calendar for any more progress to happen on that bill. But unless the majority leader says, now, we're going to take this bill up today on this session day, it just stays on the calendar. So what happens is a legislator has an idea for a bill. He or she usually puts out a co-sponsor memorandum to try to get others to sign on to it. So they sign on to it, and the bill and the language is actually developed by the Legislative Reference Bureau, who are the experts in the legalese and what other parts of laws or the Constitution it's going to address. And then once that's ready to go, it is formally introduced by the prime sponsor, and it automatically, within a very short period of time, has to go to a committee. So it's the Speaker of the House and it's the President pro tem of the Senate that decides which committee gets the bill. So you can have amendment. Let's say it's a House bill. It goes through the House. It goes through the Senate. And at the very end of the Senate, on third consideration, because in the Senate you can amend a bill, it can even be a gut and replace. Or it can add a topic that you and I would think that's not germane. And then it goes back simply to the House Rules Committee to either agree to it or not. They can amend it, and it goes to the full House chamber. So the House would only have one, in that example, the House would only have one chance to look at a bill as it was just amended. And in the House, you only need 3 hours from the last amendment to have a final vote on it. In the Senate, it's 10. So third consideration can be done. Again, it has to be put on the calendar, out of the queue, and almost immediately. It's very rare that they have third consideration, which immediately goes to final vote. Like I said, in the House, they cannot amend it. So they only have one opportunity to amend the bill, the whole chamber, the whole floor. And they have two in the Senate because they can do it on third consideration, and they certainly have done that. When the amended bill is available to the public, you have 3 hours from then that you have to wait before the next chamber can have a final vote on it. Yes, it used to be 24. So here's the example of House Bill 1425. Doesn't matter what the bill is. It got referred to judiciary. It was reported from committee within a week and had the automatic part, first consideration, laid on the table. And then it was about a month before it was called off the table and onto the calendar. Another week before the majority leader calls it up for second consideration, and it was an amendment. And every time there's an amendment, they do a reprinting of the bill showing what has changed. And they give it a new printer number. That's what that 1950 is. So the bill number still stays the same, but each bill number has a printer's number on it. So it gets taken to appropriations right after second consideration, which is typical. It didn't come out, let's see, that was another week. And they had third consideration on it and a final vote. So now it's in the Senate. So it gets sent to their Judiciary Committee, and it is reported and amended June, July, August, September, October. Finally, it comes out of that committee. And it could have stayed in that committee and never come out. It's all up to the committee chair. Second consideration was had. It went to appropriations for that fiscal note, and then it's reported as committed, so they did not amend it. The House Appropriations Committee, even though they break this rule from time to time, is that they are not allowed to amend the bill as the Appropriations Committee unless it has something to do with the fiscal aspect of the bill, not the merit of the bill. But they have They have not followed that rule in the past. Then every once in a while, the Senate doesn't do this all the time, but they send it to the Rules Committee. The Rules Committee is chaired by the Majority Leader. And more than likely, what happens is that that's done because they want one more amendment on the thing. The Rules Committee meets in the Rules Room, which has no live stream, it has no recording devices, and it's a pretty small room. And so they can do things in there with a much smaller audience. So then they bring it out and have their third consideration and final passage. So now the bill has been amended in the Senate. So it does go back to the House, and it goes to the Rules Committee first. And that Rules Committee is also chaired by the Majority Leader. And they can amend it if they want. Oftentimes they just bring it back out again. It's just one more little filter, because if you remember in the House, they can't do any more amendments. So then it's done, and it's signed in the House and Senate, goes to the governor, who approves it, and it becomes enacted. So I've grayed out that automatic area where it comes out of committee, and it is automatically given first consideration and laid on the table. And the other one is after second consideration, I've grayed out it's sent to the Appropriations Committee. Those things happen regardless. All the black that remains for both sides of the chamber has to be done by a small group of people, not my elected official in either the House or the Senate, because they're not a leader. So what you have is, at any one time, a single bill has, going through the House and going through the Senate, can be blocked by the committee chair, the Majority Leader, the Speaker of the House, and on the Senate side, the same, their committee chair, their Majority Leader, and the President. And as it says, regardless of the support that our legislators have for it, or regardless of the support that Pennsylvanians have for that bill. Now keep in mind that one House of Representatives represents less than 0.5% of the population of Pennsylvania, and just 2% of the Pennsylvania population for the Senate. Yet they have this power. And it's interesting, I didn't find time to get the statistic done, but I know some of the majority leaders over the last 6 years that I have been doing this, they're in rural areas that are either red or blue and hardly ever even have a primary candidate that runs against them. So with the League of Women Voters of Pennsylvania, Fair Districts came up with a campaign called Fix Harrisburg. And that was that first screen that I showed you. And on there, if you've never been there, it's a lot of good information. Fixharrisburg.com, it's as simple as that. And on the first page, we actually have produced 4 reports about the performance of the legislature. The bottom one here is the newest one, and it is looking at the performance of all of last session. So all of 2003 and 2023 and 24. And I'm going to highlight a few of those things and also give you an update on the 12 months that we just went through of this session. 23, 24, these are surrounding states and how many bills they got passed. And at the bottom, you'll see not only how much money they make a year in that position, but you will also see that their sessions, other than New York, are not year-long sessions, let alone 2 years long. And they get stuff done. So we thought, well, that was 23, 24. For the first time in a long time, we had a split legislature. The House had a Democratic majority, and the Senate had their Republican majority. So maybe that was part of the problem. So went back and looked at 4 different sessions. So only that last one, 23-24, was a split legislature. The other 3 sessions actually had Republicans in both houses, and they still couldn't get things done. So that's about 4,000 bills get introduced in the two-year session, and only 1,000 of them come out of committee. So 3,000 remain there, and at the end of the session, which is November 30th of even-numbered years, they die. So when the new session starts up, they'll have to, if they want to keep pursuing it, they would need to reintroduce that bill. So from the 1,000, about 720 gets passed to the next chamber, and 420 get signed. So those are the averages. So it really wasn't a stark difference between when there was a split legislature and when there was a unified legislature. So the committee bottleneck. Bill doesn't go anywhere unless it gets considered in committee. So the House had 2,000 bills within their 23 committees, and only 80 of them came out to have a chance on the House floor. 800, excuse me, thank you. The committees, on average, those 23 committees met 13 times in a 2-year period. This is our full-time legislature, third highest paid in the country. They met on average 13 times. The maximum was 33, but on average they met only 13 times during 24 months as a full-time legislature. Well, it's hard for those that have part-time legislatures, because if you only have 60 days to do what you need to do and get it through both chambers, then you meet. So you're jamming it in there. So the Senate in its 20 committees had 1,600 bills. Only 500 of them came out. They averaged 11 voting meetings in the 2-year period. So I'm coming in here with 2025, so we're looking at a 12-month period here. The House had, on average, House committees had 8 voting meetings, and the Senate had 5. And they didn't pass a lot of bills, but they had lots of bills that had been referred to them. Well, the meetings, I need a life because I've watched a lot of videos of these committee meetings. And they're typically not very long because it's all been worked out. This is just performative. There might be somebody who has an amendment that's from the minority that gets discussed or whatever, but pretty much there were oftentimes, they don't even take a roll call vote. The minority will just say, we're all voting yes, or we're all voting no. There are hearings. There are less hearings than there are voting meetings. So not very much, but they could be talking to their informed people, lobbyists. The committee chair decides who's going to come and present and give testimony. So it can be very lopsided. I don't know whether you remember Representative Metcalf. He gave very lopsided hearings. That report with 2023-24, we wanted very much we focused on bipartisan. And I can tell you that within Fair Districts and this research group, we had lots of discussions about what does bipartisan mean. So we came up with a definition, and just because we wanted to see, certainly if a bill is so lopsided towards one partisan area or the other, it's not going to go through with the split legislature even. But so what we looked at was, well, what are the stats on unanimous bills? You can't argue what is, that unanimous is bipartisan, right? So we see here that the House had unanimous votes on 116 bills, House bills, and almost half of them never even received a Senate floor vote. And the same percentage actually for the Senate, who passed out with unanimous votes to the House. Now, a little portion of that is because sometimes you're running a bill like Fair Districts likes to do, not that we run bills, but we have House Bill 31 and Senate Bill 131. So it's the same bill. If one starts moving, then maybe you don't need the other one. And there's also, I actually talked to a legislator about this, and one of the reasons why Senate bill comes over but the House has one is because they want the House prime sponsor to get the credit for the bill and not the senator. So stepping back, when it was a unified legislature, they did pass more unanimous bills, but the percentage that didn't get a vote in the other chamber was even worse at 58% and 54%. So our full-time legislature had, in the 2 years, 2023, 24, the House had 48 session days and 49 session days. Now you keep seeing me talking about voting meetings. Sometimes they have non-voting meetings where they're just accepting reports, they're taking bills that was just introduced and referring them to committee. So they're doing some administrative stuff, but they're not really moving any bills along. The same in committee. They will have committee meetings that are only on House resolutions, like designating a week for this cause or a day for that cause or a month for that. And if that's the meeting and that's all they're doing, I don't count that. And the Senate had 57 and 46 for those respective. And they passed the 239 in 2 years, full-time legislature. They're the third highest paid. Their base salary, some of us like to call that their minimum wage, is, back in that session was $110,000. That's just base salary. That's not their per diems, that's not mileage, that's not retirement, it's not insurance. The total cost of our legislature in that period, actually the budget year, the last budget year, was $480 million, which is $1.3 million a day, 365 days a year, so today.
What does that mean?
Well, when you look at the budget has the line items for the Senate, has line items for the House, have line items for their legislative agencies that support them in the work. And when you add that up, it's $480 million for a 12-month period, a budget year. There are two line items, one under the Senate called caucus R&D, and one line item in the House, caucus R&D. And that is 60% of that $480 million. And you don't know what is being paid for. You know, we talk about outside money. This is, not only is it inside money, it's our money. And we don't know where it's going. They have, the legislature has an annual audit, and unfortunately, the audit comes out tomorrow. No, the 3rd, the same day as the governor gives his budget address. But that is not broken down any further. And that's the money that they use, the leadership uses to decide who gets what. Are you voting the way I want you to vote? Okay, well, your district office is this, and you get another staff person, and oh, you didn't, so you lose. His Representative Mahaffey lost his office in the Capitol because he wasn't towing their line. So there's so much influence that these leaders have, no wonder the rank and file toe the line. So that's inside money, and that's our money, our taxpayer dollars. When Pennsylvania wrote their sunshine law, they have a very specific statement in there that says it is not covered with political caucuses. And actually, that's the way it is in a lot of states. I think Colorado might be the only one, because they need an opportunity to talk to each other. But there's one thing, when I think caucus, I think they're in the room talking about a bill. But that line item includes all those other things. And it falls under caucus. They excluded it in the bill that they wrote under the sunshine laws. It's interesting because I think they're trying to tighten up the sunshine laws right now for local municipalities and things, and I'm like, roll my eyes. So in the last 12 months through 2025, the House had 60 voting meetings and 51 in the Senate. They passed 71 bills in 12 months, and 11 of those were appropriation bills. So only 60 bills actually addressed making something different and better. And some of the appropriations bills are too, but now their base salary is $113,600. 30 years ago, they passed legislation that gave them automatic pay raises based on a CPI. And so they've been enjoying that for quite some time. Again, that just happens, and it doesn't get put into the legislative journal, doesn't get discussed. There was one time during COVID, they voted to not accept an increase. Of course, the CPI for that year was. And there are those, they'll tell you, that they don't accept that increase. But what happens is they don't accept that increase for that year. Then the new year comes on, and they just don't accept that one, but they go back and take that one. I think Patty Kim might be the only one who is actually making the same. There might be others, but I know she's my now senator.
Does that 113 include per diems?
No,
They get per diems
that's their minimum wage, I like to call it. No, they make more than that. Yes. And if you're a leader, there's leadership bonuses that you get. So you make more than that per year as a base salary if you're in a leadership position. And now we're at really almost $500 million that our legislature costs us a year. And again, we have the two lines in the Senate and the House for caucus R&D, and that is now up to $250,000 that we have no clue what it's going for. So Spotlight PA this past December reports, and it's some aspect of this I agree with. It's not maybe just the number of laws passed or the number of session days to look at productivity or performance. House Majority Leader Bradford said that the impact on regular people in Pennsylvania is a better metric. And the Majority Leader in the Senate, Pittman, says we focus on quality, not quantity, and the number of bills passed is much less important than the valuable substance of the issues addressed. So here's the three that did have success. And the three is that first responders can now get workers' compensation for post-traumatic stress injury. Very good. It took them 6 years to do that since the first bill came out. And it's hard to understand because when the bill in that session actually got enacted in 2024, it was almost unanimous or near unanimous votes the whole way through, committees, first, second, third considerations, the other committee, the other. So what were they doing the first 6 years with the bill? Telemedicine took 8 years. First one since 2016. Senator Vogel was a champion on this one. Had bipartisan sponsors. 5 bills in the House. Never got out of committee. A lot of these bills just don't even get out of committee. And the last example is property tax rebate program. For 11 years, the income eligibility for seniors and people with disabilities was the same, and they kept getting Social Security increases, which is included in that eligibility. And so by the time they were successful, 11 years later, a third of those who qualified, 200,000 Pennsylvanians, were kicked off of being eligible for the rent rebate because of their inaction. That's quality, yeah. These are bills that do impact regular people and they have a quality and a valuable substance, but for some reason it's taken them. Now, you remember, except for 2023, 24, all those previous years, both of the chambers had the same majority. So here are some bills that continue to be failures. Raising the minimum wage, I like to call they have a minimum wage. 46 bills in 10 years and they can't figure it out. In that 10-year period, the legislators' salaries increased 45%. That is not a typo. We have a quote from the chairman of that committee. He said, the bills failed to move because some legislators favored raising the wage to $20 and some preferred $15, some wanted regional, and others are arguing for a statewide increase. And he says, trying to get everyone on board with the same thing is rather difficult. Isn't that their job? This is what was happening in minimum wage during those years. Those are all of our surrounding states, and they started increasing their minimum wage, most of them way back in 2015, and have been going up. And we're still at the $7.15. We're at the bottom, the blue, the flat line. Yeah, the flat line is us. 30 other states have raised their minimum wage. These are the ones that are just surrounding us. And the research is done, actually they have this great committee that puts out a report every year on the minimum wage and how many of it are women and how many are teenagers, and and they say every year that it's got to be raised, and here it is, and they're paying this group to do this, and then they ignore it because it's rather difficult. So after raising the minimum wage, we have the childhood lead testing. In the same aspect of this, they formed a lead advisory board to research this, and it took almost about a year, and they came out with a report, and that report had 12 suggestions of legislative changes, and they actually gave the text of the bill and what needed to be struck out and what needed to be added. None has been enacted. We had one that almost got through, and it was a Senate bill from Senator Baker. It ended up in the House, in the Appropriations Committee, who was only supposed to amend on fiscal aspects of the bill, and they didn't. At the very last minute, they changed it so that it's required to encouraged, which is essentially the same thing that we have now. Independent redistricting commission, we all know from fair districts that we've had 14 bills in 10 years. None of them made it out to a final vote. Two of them, one had a gut and replace, and the other one added a poison amendment to it for establishing judicial districts so that they could gerrymander judicial districts. All the others remained in committee, ignored. And of course, with March on Harrisburg, I had updated one that they had given me and found 39 bills in 25 years. 4 of them made it out of committee, and that's all. And 1 of them made it out of the chamber, but didn't get out of the committee of the next chamber. And when you put all these bills in, Carol was saying, well, some of those bills, what people are going to argue, weren't the best. Yeah, they're not all perfect. Most bills aren't, but amend them. Collaborate, compromise, discuss. All of these things would have a positive impact on regular people and are of valuable substance. Here's the Labor and Industry Committee person said, this is just to remind you how much the leadership is in control. On a bill of this magnitude, the preferred way to advance it is to have an agreement in place before starting it through the legislative process, and leadership should be involved in those discussions. But rules can be changed. These rules are not in the Constitution. They vote on rules the very beginning of each session, and they do it the first day. And I can understand that, because until you have the approved rules, you really can't do anything except pick your your majority minority leaders and either the Speaker of the House or the President pro tem. You can't form committees, you can't do anything. But they can be changed. And they're given, and it's almost as though they're debating these until the very end, because most of the times when you step in for that very first day of ceremonial swearing in and oaths, and you got all the freshmen in there, they haven't seen these rules. And they're like 40, 60 pages long. And in the Senate, they don't even tell you, they don't even mark it up like a regular bill that says, oh, I took this out and I added this other language. It's just fresh text. The House usually does do, at least marks it up some, but you have hours. We've had Representative Samuelson said it. I got this late last night. And here they are at 11 o'clock in the morning the next day having to vote on it. But it can be changed at any time. A legislator can establish a resolution, like a bill, but a resolution that says this is the rule and this is how I want it changed. And it goes to the Rules Committee, which is chaired by the majority leader. And I can tell you, I forgot to look up the statistic again. In the last 10 years, I can't remember the number, 40, 50 resolutions to change rules. Goose egg. Not even considered, not discussed, nothing. And some of them were, pretty minor. Others were trying to promote collaboration. And I'm kind of ending with, it's a very depressing subject. So this is still depressing because we don't have it, but other states do have rules that help them to collaborate and get bills enacted that help regular people and have valuable substance. But we have none of them. So committees are required to hear and or report on all bills. A crossover day. That is, especially when you have a partial year to do your work. That means in the Senate, you have all the Senate bills that have been introduced, and they get passed over to the House. But on this day, no more Senate bills can go to the House. So you better get your work done. And the same coming back over. So at some same date, the House is only looking at Senate bills, and the Senate is only looking at House bills. Here's Matt Bradford's. I think there's nothing like deadlines to get stuff done. Sadly, that's a part of human nature. Well, pass the rule. Get crossover days. This was an interview with, I think it was Spotlight PA again, about how bills get passed in clumps because, it's the budget in June, or it's the end of the year, or it's the end of the session. And they get it in clumps because they sit back, 12 months has gone by, and they're like, well, we got another 11. So we're really in no hurry, right? So what it, and it's just in the House, and it's just happened like maybe in the last 2 or 3 sessions. So the first bill that passed, I was correct, says that you can't amend the rules resolution you're just about to vote on. After you vote on it, you can amend it, but it's a resolution that goes to the Rules Committee and it gets ignored. Majority Leader Cutler at the time said, you can change the rules any time throughout the session. We just need these to be able to get our committees together and start doing the work of the people. There's some negotiations with the minority party, but most of the time you'll hear and read, again, I need a life, I read the transcripts from that first day, that it says this isn't what we negotiated, or we hardly negotiated, or we didn't know anything about this as the minority party. I mentioned NCSL is a wonderful, I use them, I'm on their website almost daily because of all the different aspects, because they're looking at all the different state legislatures. Now, part of their service is that they're also servicing the members of these other state legislators. But they're also, because it helps them, the other states know, well, what are the other states doing? And so they put this together, and they're a wonderful organization. NCSL.com. So there are some states that require that all the bills have to be heard and reported on in committee. It would, with 4,000 in Pennsylvania, that would be quite ridiculous, and some of these are quite ridiculous that don't necessarily need to get a vote. But some of those states that do that also say, you get 5 bills to be introduced this year. That's all. So there is some, prioritizing you have to do. When bills that are reported, we talked about this, are reported from committee, they're automatically on the calendar, and the calendar is looked at. I think even in the Senate rules, it says it has, the bills are considered in the order that they came out, except they have special calendars, and they've tabled this, and we've tried working with rank and file legislators to get them to kind of understand, so what is it like for you? And don't you want, and you campaigned on this, and it keeps getting, we had Mark, I can't remember what year it was, Fair Districts had a big thing that says, just say no. So it's going to take a long time, but it's a loud voice, and it's a pressure on leadership. And we did, in 2019, I believe, we had a big push for legislators to actually have great collaborative rule changes put in resolutions and which goes to the Rules Committee. And so they were able to speak on that. And that gave, I don't know when Spotlight PA came on, or I don't know if there's more that the press can then use to not only educate the people, but shame the leaders that are doing this. Thank you very much.